Joining us live from Liverpool is Ross Kempsell, our political editor. Good afternoon, Ross.
Good afternoon, Matthew.
I've got to start by asking you about Tosh McDonald. Did you catch his line about getting up setting his alarm an hour earlier so he could hate Thatcher an hour extra each day?
I did. Not a surprise, I have to say. Another Labour source texted me, that's a classic load of old Tosh from Tosh McDonald. But a rather obvious one, perhaps. But yes, I have to say, I think Margaret Thatcher has been mentioned more at this this Labour conference than Conservative Prime Minister Theresa May so far.
And presumably not in a good way, as in, I used to admire her, that kind of new Labour take on the Thatch.
Absolutely right. It's completely the opposite, I would say, Matthew.
Who do you think they hate most, Thatcher or Blair?
Difficult one. I think they're busy hating each other at the moment today. So they're rather engaged. The Shadow Cabinet's busy hating each other. They're pretty much in open warfare this afternoon. So Keir Starmer has just given his major speech to conference. That is the biggest speech, I think it's fair to say, from the Shadow Brexit Secretary. As you know, there's been toing and throwing on this issue of Brexit in the past 24 hours, and that really has dominated conference. The reason for that is there is this crunch vote on Brexit on a composite motion, it's called. It says that all options will be on the table, and basically what top Labour politicians are fighting about is what does that mean? What does that phrase mean? Options on the table.
Do you have any insight, any insight at all as to what direction it's going to go?
I am told, and this is the analysis, I think the consensus so far, although let's not put the writing on the wall because anything could happen, but I think the likely outcome is that conference will pass this motion, that we'll have it as its top line, that all options are on the table, and then both sides will claim victory, essentially. So those who would like to see a second referendum, a Leave Remain second referendum, and I think we can now safely say that Keir Starmer is absolutely one of those, because he said very explicitly in his speech that he wants to see Remain on that ballot paper. I think they will claim victory and say this is a symbolic victory, at least for them, that the party has opened the way for a second Leave Remain referendum, but also those who just want there to be a second referendum, possibly on the terms of a deal, will also claim victory, because that will be their interpretation of everything on the table. So the great political genius of this, you might argue, is that this fudge allows everyone to say that they have won, and that does, to a certain extent, keep the Labour Party together on Brexit.
When will we know, Ross? When will we know what the line will be?
Well, the vote has been delayed. It was supposed to be earlier this afternoon, but it's been delayed now until about 5:20, I've heard in the last few moments. So we will know by late evening absolutely what everybody has said, because it's not really the vote that matters, it's what they say afterwards, it's how they interpret it. Right.
Now, tell us about some reflections, if you wouldn't mind, on John McDonnell's speech to conference yesterday, which was... I wouldn't say it was astonishing, because I think last year, Labour conference, Jeremy Corbyn set out the most socialist agenda that I have ever been aware of. A bit more detail this year from John McDonnell.
Absolutely. This was a real massive nationalisation policy announced of the water industry, putting aspects of the water industry into local councils, if you like, councils of consumers, councils of workers. Putting forward a public ownership scheme for water was really the top policy announcement, but that speech was full of other policy announcements as well. And in the media that John McDonnell did to go along with it, he talked about a 15-year revolution in the UK.
Yeah, they did. Corbyn last year, if memory serves, talked about a 25-year plan. And one of the great concerns that even hardened Labour supporters have voiced to me is, you can't introduce a plan in anticipation of winning 2, 3, 4 elections in a row. Labour's never won 4 elections in a row, so how can you possibly deliver or even plan for a 20-year plan? It makes no sense.
Yes, you're right, and I think privately, if you speak to senior Labour sources, including senior Shadow Cabinet sources, they admit that the vast majority of their programme, because of the way that the system works, would be difficult to achieve in one term, let alone in 15 to 25 years. If you're talking about what can be achieved realistically in a single government, the kind of policies which we've seen outlined this week, if they were done in that kind of period of time, would really be quite a radical intervention, I think.
Ross, it's Kevin here. To what extent do you think Corbyn and his gang up there are creating a false paradise for themselves? Because I watch it on the TV and they're full of this triumphalism. We're going to get this election.
They've seen the opinion polls.
We're going to be in power. And the thing about Brexit, they call that constructive ambiguity, don't they? That nobody really knows what they're talking about. But will they get away with this? Because a recent poll that Sky News took, I think, has revealed that I think it's... the vast majority, 71% of people, do not trust Corbyn to get them a decent deal on Brexit. So are they, as I say, existing in their own false paradise? Is there a greater reality outside of this conference that projects a much grimmer view for Labour than they like to believe?
Well, I'm not really sure what the paradise here would be, because it's been far from paradise really at the top of the party. It's been kind of open warfare on this issue, and there has been, I would compare it really to hell, I think, at the top of the shadow cabinet. I mean, we had, for example, in the last 24 hours, we had the shadow chancellor contradicting the shadow Brexit secretary on the biggest issue facing conference. We heard nothing from Jeremy Corbyn on it. It's now been teed up that if he avoids this issue in his speech, if he avoids mentioning and giving some kind of inflection to the Brexit motion, which is passed today, it will be a total missed opportunity for him if he doesn't mention it, so he will have to address it. But in terms of the wider country, I think the risk is that people will come out of Labour conference feeling that they are no clearer as to Labour's overall position, overall philosophy on Brexit. People might know that it's been debated, they might know that it's been democratically discussed, but will they really know and be able to explain in a sentence what Labour would do?
But then again, if you've got the Tories divided over Chequers, if you've got Labour divided over what its take on Brexit will be, no Brexit is ever going to go through the House of Commons. It will never happen.
Well, certainly that's not what Theresa May thinks.
Oh, I know.
Theresa May, certainly Theresa May would like her
She's strong and stable on that point. And if she endlessly repeats that, I'm sure we'll believe her.
Very clear on it, apparently.
She would like her plan to sail through the Commons. I don't think it's going to sail through by any means. But she would like her plan to be passed. Time, the only thing that is going to tell on that is time. But really the broader inflection, which is, I think, what we're getting to here, is that how do you break this impasse that there is in both parties on Brexit? And that is why in the last few days this issue of a general election has reared its head, if you like, because obviously a general election is one way to kind of break the deadlock, if you would say. But in order for that to happen before March 2019, obviously we would need either the Prime Minister to be forced out by her hard Brexiteer right Tory MPs, and it doesn't look like that has happened yet. We've got close to it. We've certainly felt as if we got close to it, but it just has not come off. And I don't think there's any real sign that that is going to change in the next few weeks or months.
Is it possible, last question, is it possible that the hardcore Brexiteers within the Tory party might wake up and smell the coffee and realise that if they still insist on a very narrow form of Brexit, that might very well result in the government falling down and a general election, which might, if the opinion polls are right, put Jeremy Corbyn in number 10. Isn't it possible the likes of Jacob Rees-Mogg might just think, that's madness, let's go with Chequers?
Right, and this is exactly the issue which is keeping them from moving at the moment, because I talk to the MPs in the European Research Group all the time, that group of Brexit-supporting Tory MPs, and I think apart from a kind of hardcore group of maybe a dozen, the rest of them, I have to say, are pretty scared of an election. I think that's just honest to put that out there. And why wouldn't you be if you were a Conservative MP? Because the polls are pretty much neck and neck. They swap 4 or 3 points every week, but nothing more than that. Also, there's this bruised-ish feeling from the 2017 snap election, which is still very much the feeling across the Parliamentary Conservative Party that that election did not go well for them, that a lot of people who thought that they weren't going to lose their seats lost their seats, and even more so the fact that those who kept their seats had massively damaged majorities. They don't want to face that or risk that again.
Lovely talking to you, Ross. Damien Hirst next.